Hey, this is Tom LeCompte,
And I'm Gavin Durson.
and welcome to Keep It Simple podcast, where we're talking about all things simple as it relates to ecclesiology and the church. We are followers of Christ who seek to encourage and worship Christ, in a little more simple venue. Maybe not a cathedral, maybe more like maybe a living room. And I'm joined by Gavin Durson, my co-host.
And I'm glad to be joined by Tom LeCompte, my co-host.
Who's joined by Gavin Durson, his co-host. Good deal. What do you got for us, Gavin? What do you got?
Well, I'm excited today. And I recently, we had a breakfast this past weekend. I do these things from time to time, and I thought it would be good to bring this conversation to the podcast today. And we had a back to basics breakfast. And I think sometimes when we go down this road, Tom, you've been at this for how many years? 20?
At this what?
Simple church.
House church?
Yeah.
About 18 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
19.
and I've been at it here as well for about 10. And it's sometimes good just to hit the pause button and kind of remind ourselves like the basics of what is this we're doing? Why are we doing it? And as I've done that recently, I've realized that a lot of that has shifted for me and changed. And so not dramatically, but seems like it's been fine-tuned a bit in kind of my heart. And I'm always reworking and thinking through, why am I doing this? Am I, what motivates me, what inspires me, what are the ideas that are foundational to house church, simple church. And there's a lot of different ideas about that. I mean, you can go online, and especially now, house churches kind of become popular. Mega churches do house church, and there are house church networks out there. You go to their website and their staff, and it looks a lot in some ways like, I think like, man, that's what I thought I was doing. And now I'm realizing, no, I'm doing something a little different. Why am I doing that? And what are the foundational things that kind of keep me chugging along down this road and inspired and excited about what God's doing? So today I want to kind of do a back to basics. Maybe this will be a two-parter, and I want to just kind of walk through that with you, Tom. And I'd love to get your feedback and any listeners out there as well. So that's what we're going to do today, back to basics. But before we get into that, let's remind folks, Tom, where they can listen to this podcast.
Well, you can watch it on YouTube through Simple Church Alliance. Is that correct? Okay. Yep. And then we're on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify under simplechurchpodcast.com.
Yeah. And today we are going to have a video in this podcast. You can listen to it, but it would be much more helpful to see. So we'll link it in. It'll be linked, but this one might be a good one. This might be a good occasion to check it out on YouTube. And while you're there, subscribe and like and all that stuff. Just and let us know, leave us a comment, let us know that you're out there. That's always encouraging. And if no one is listening out there, that's okay too, because Tom and I do this mostly to encourage each other, and we've enjoyed doing this for many years now. So, so we'll give it a shot. All right, let's get into it. Back to the basics. One of the things I want to just basically, I'm going to break this up into kind of two parts. The first part, I want to, Tom, kind of talk a little bit about the basics in sort of the theory of what is simple church, how we do it. It'll be more theoretical. The second part, kind of more of the practical aspects of simple church. But before we get into the video and we talk about that a little bit, I think we were talking a few podcasts ago of one of the basics that, I just continually come back to. And I think it's so important for anyone interested in house church, simple church, organic church, is this idea that is very much a biblical idea that Jesus is building the church, not us. And so, I think that for anyone out there who's new to this conversation, I think this is sort of for me, when I started, it was sort of like wow, like he is building the church, like, and the gates of hell are not prevailing against it. Mm-hmm. Jesus is the leader, and he is still in charge. It's on his shoulders. The church is on his back. And as a result, that really frees us. think a hurdle people encounter a lot of times is like, can I even do this? I don't feel like I can lead a church. Well, good news. Jesus is the one who's leading the charge. He's the one that's doing it. And it's always complicated in theory when we put in the reality that he lives in us and we're not just sitting back watching all this happen. We are involved. But I've always said, man, if I'm going to err on a side, I want to err on the side of Jesus being in charge more than Gavin Durson being in charge. And so that's just a foundational thing that I hope encourages people. And it's something that we always have to remember, that we're not the one building this thing. Jesus is building it. He's doing a great job at it, despite what the news or what our eyes may tell us. It's right on schedule. It's right on task. He's in charge, and we get to be a part of that. And I think that's such an important basic of church in general that we have to keep in mind when we start down this path.
Yeah, what is that scripture? Unless the Lord builds the house, we labor in vain.
Yeah.
It's in the Psalms, I believe.
Yeah. And he told Peter, upon this rock, I will build my church. Of course, our Catholic friends maybe look at that a little different, but the point is that he said he would build it. And so that's just so encouraging to me, that I'm not trying to build the church. I don't even really like the word church planter, as if I'm the one who is planting a church. Words get very complicated when you start peeling these layers of this onion off. But Jesus is building the church. He's planting the churches. We're getting to be a part of it. I tend to view myself, when I read the scriptures, as Jesus and the disciples. I tend to look at myself as one of the 12 more than I do Jesus. And maybe that's helpful. So he's building the church. So with that, I'd like to just share this video with you all. I put this together a while back. It's available on YouTube as a standalone video on our Simple Church Alliance as well. It's on Facebook. It's out there. It's called Simple Church Illustrated. And I think I put some time into choosing my words carefully, which sometimes I don't always do. I can ramble on. So it's very succinct, very short. And I think it says kind of a lot of where I'm at, and I'll elaborate more on it after we get into it. But let's check this video out, and then we'll go from there. This is Simple Church Illustrated. What is Simple Church? Consider this illustration. Today, when we hear the word church, we often think of a building or a service to attend. We say things like, hey, there's my church, or it's time for church to start. This is how the word has become ingrained in our speech and understanding. Instead of a meeting, building, or organization, Simple Church seeks to recapture the simple New Testament idea of seeing and experiencing the church as a family. What kind of family is the church? Just before Jesus left this earth, he gave a new commandment to his followers. As I have loved you, so love one another. The New Testament church was to be a family that was primarily about receiving Jesus' love and extending his love to others. This experience would fulfill his mission of making disciples of all the nations. So a local church, in its simplest form, can be understood as a family of people receiving Jesus' love, sharing his love through relationships with others, and making disciples of all the nations as we go through life. Rather than a denomination or organization, a simple church primarily identifies itself with the kingdom that Jesus spoke about. It's hard for us today to wrap our minds around Jesus' kingdom, in part because we tend to think of kings as bad. But Jesus is a perfect, loving, compassionate, generous king that power cannot corrupt and who lays down his life for his people. A simple church family looks to Jesus for wisdom and guidance in all matters. While not fully realized until he returns, Jesus proclaimed that his kingdom was at hand now. Rather than a well-defined organization, his kingdom is much more akin to a body or living organism that is moving and shifting on earth as his people go about their daily lives. Simple church families can experience his kingdom daily in any location where Jesus is followed as king. But for centuries, Christians have tried to characterize his church in more rigid ways. Today, we often try to add as a necessity to a local church family buildings, budgets, programs, and professionals. While these additions can be a blessing, sometimes they serve as a distraction from the church receiving and giving his love and fulfilling his great commission. And sometimes these structures can actually have nothing to do with his kingdom at all. In a simple church, we seek to function as a family of people following King Jesus without these added elements in an attempt to focus our attention on the essentials. While simple churches may meet in homes, around dinner tables, or in ways that may look more like a family reunion or get-together, the focus is not primarily on a weekly meeting. Rather, simple church is about a way of life where we seek to follow King Jesus together as a family in his kingdom, receiving his love, sharing it with others, and making disciples along the way. This is what we mean when we say simple church, and hopefully this video makes simple church simpler for you to understand. I'm Gavin Durson for the Simple Church Alliance.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. So this video that Simple Church Illustrated in many ways, for me, it's obviously there's a lot that it doesn't address, but it does sort of address the basics of the idea of what we mean when we say simple church, or what we mean when we say church. And Tom, I just, kind of throw it out to you. I'd just be interested in any comments or things that stood out to you that jumped out at you that were helpful and kind of as you watch that.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. So much of our understanding of church centers around a place and a program, a building, instead of focusing on we are the people of Christ, and we are told when we are encouraged to gather together. It doesn't specify a place. It doesn't specify how or when. Well, kind of when, but we we look at the Sabbath and the Lord's Day, but yeah, we've added a lot to what the early church did, and I think a lot of that is kind of models from the Old Testament, from the temple, the priesthood. We've added some things that may not be necessary. They're not bad, and they can be helpful, but over the years they've been added on, and we've come to expect them. And therefore, when we don't see them, we think, something's weird here. This is not right.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to go back and look at what the early church did and didn't do. And what they didn't do is not meant to be, I think, not meant to be canon. But what they did do, I think we should do and encourage other churches to do. It's like you said, keep it simple and
Yeah.
center not on gathering, but center on Jesus.
Yeah. Well, and that, so when I think of the basics of simple church, and as illustrated here in this video, the first being that Jesus is building his church that we addressed before we watched it. The second one for me in this video that has become more important to me over the years is this idea that we're primarily to be a family of people who are receiving Jesus's love, loving others, making disciples. And specifically, this first mention was receiving his love. And that's something that, as I've done house church and simple church, I think is so important. There's some other videos out there, and even church tradition, all churches kind of a lot of times will talk about making disciples, loving God, loving people. And it seems like maybe a slight difference, maybe that it's no difference at all, to say that we're primarily about loving God. But in my experience, I think coming at this God's work and God's kingdom from a position, first and foremost, of saying, like the new command he gave of, as I have loved you, love one another, starting with this from a place of receiving God's love, to me is just so important. Because if we as followers of Christ are not secure in his love for us, then we might find that we're trying to do house church or build a ministry out of some maybe even unrecognized desire to try to earn God's love. And when we come at it from a place of like, man, God loves me, I know he loves me, I'm growing in my understanding, first and foremost, of his love for me. Then we can't give his love to others if we don't have it ourselves. We can't give away what we don't have. So it's sort of this internal work of recognizing and receiving God's love for us, and anything that we do in a simple church coming from that place. As he has loved us, we're going to love each other. And so there's a lot more there practically, I think, of how that may flesh out. And I'm not going to get into all that, but this idea of, rather than saying, let's try to love God with all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength, let's start there. I think that ends up reverse engineering. Jesus gave that command as a summary of the Old Testament law. What we can end up doing without recognizing it is just rewriting old law that we're trying to fulfill, and checklists we're trying to do. And then we're trying to put that on other people in our house church. And that starts to feel a little bit like religiosity that many people are walking away from. And that it smells bad. It feels like we're trying to get people to do stuff. And certainly we're going to do stuff, but if my heart, I think God's heart is that it comes out of this place of his love, and that we're secure in it. And we're not doing things because we're trying to earn God's love or get people to do stuff as somehow a reflection on getting God to love us more or less. But we're coming at this from a place of saying, you know what, even if I don't do a house church, I know that God loves me, and it's not going to change his love for me. I could go to the mega church and God's going to love me just the same. Because I know how much he loves me, and I'm growing in my understanding of how much he loves me, and nothing can change that. He is that father that loves both the prodigal son and the son that was in the home missing his love. He loves both of them. His love didn't shift and change based on their behavior or actions. His love was constant. And I think that's just so important. So there's a lot there. There's a great book I recommend called He Loves Me, by Wayne Jacobson, that's really helped me. And certainly I've shared, I think in a few podcasts ago, some of this has come from just understanding God's love in deeper ways as I've walked with my daughter these last few years. But I just have seen that as being so crucial. And as I've helped other people try to start house churches, why are you doing it? Do you know he loves you? And if you do, then man, it's going to be awesome. If it's just you and your family for a year, or just you and your next, you're not sitting around feeling like God's upset or disappointed, because he loves you and he's pleased with you. And that's so healthy and important, I think. So that's a big basic for me.
That is a good illustration. And I was just noticing when we were playing that on YouTube, there's a bunch of videos out there that are equally good and very helpful. And maybe it is hard to relate the concept of not worshiping in a church building under a trained pastor. That's all relative. We're all trained in some degree, but it's a journey, like you mentioned earlier. It is a journey, and we're not going to arrive at the perfect solution. They're not going to arrive at the perfect church. If you're in the perfect church, you better get out of it, because you're going to mess it up. So, I have enjoyed the 19 years I've done Simple Church, because it just seems so natural, so organic in just being Christians, just being Christ followers, relating to one another and learning from one another, encouraging one another, having meals, living our lives. We help each other with, somebody's got a home project, or, we have a project, to help another believer. Who would I rather do that with? It's living your life as a follower of Christ with other followers of Christ. Mm-hmm. And, once a week you get together somewhere and enjoy yourselves. It's fun. It's meant to be fun. It's meant to be fun. It's meant to be challenging. It's meant to be hard. It's easy at the same time. It's messy. All ministry is messy. Because you're getting together with other people, and if they're not messed up, you're messed up. So
Yeah,
we're all messed up.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of leads me to a couple of other basics that, I think are important that this video pulls out, and that it is, when we talk about simple church, we're talking about family, not a meeting. And family happens when we're in the meeting. When we're not in the meeting, we're a part of a family. And that, this idea of simple church being a way of life that is happening, not just on a couple hours on a particular day. I think that videos, and not just in a particular place, that the simple church idea is very much is a family idea. That's anytime we're together, and we're able to be the church, and to encourage, and to receive love others, make disciples. It's mobile. And then the other basic that I think is really important from this is just that it's a kingdom idea. It's not a denominational idea or institutional idea. And that's a big change. That's a big paradigm shift, I think, for me, that I've learned these last 10 years, is just, we don't think of kingdom a lot. It seems weird to us, especially as Americans, I think. But we identify with God's kingdom. His kingdom is here. It's coming. There's all these kind of mysterious kinds of things about it. And I honestly have a lot to learn more about the kingdom. But I think recognizing that it's his kingdom, that's what we're a part of primarily. That's what we identify with, not such and such denomination or such and such organization, but it's his kingdom. And this video points out that kingdom activity happens within the buildings, budgets, pros, programs. We're not dismissing that. It can happen outside of that too. But not all things that happen inside that square are kingdom, but kingdom does happen there. And I think that's really a basic of understanding that we're not anti those things, but we're pro kingdom. And where the kingdom and the buildings, budgets, pros, and programs overlap, we see and recognize and affirm and participate even at times in that. And where it doesn't, that's okay too. We have a different paradigm, kingdom paradigm, that we're looking through. And so to me, these are some of the basics of simple church when we think of more of the theory aspect of what simple church is, that I think are really important to bring out in this video.
Yeah, good deal.
We'll wrap it up on this one. And the next time we're back, we'll talk a little bit more about the practicality. And specifically in this video, there's a lot of questions that it doesn't answer. One of them is like, well, how do we practically look to Jesus for all wisdom and guidance? Like, how does that actually work? Like in our house church or simple church community, what is this loving others and making disciples? How does that even really work? And is there any practical things we can glean from the scriptures, from experience, and some of the things we've learned from walking down this road for a while? That's what we'll tackle in a second. But appreciate y'all joining us, and make sure you leave us a comment or a question. What did you like about the video? What insights were helpful to you? And we'll go from there, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Good deal. See you next time.